Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, pretty sad video today. So as you can read the title, it's quite dramatic, and I don't like drama, but the subject of today is quite upsetting to me. So, we all know that companies sometimes tell us good things about their products. They also give us some care information for their products and so on. And usually it's correct, and usually you should follow instructions if you don't want your product to break or malfunction. Well, when it comes to orchids, things are not the same, sadly. Now, here in Europe, when you buy an orchid, you usually get a label that says orchid, or it can say something like Phalaenopsis, Oncidium, and so on. And you do have a sort of a care manual for it. On the back of the label, you will see that it needs part shade, which is a sensible thing to advise. Don't give orchids direct sunshine. Also, they say to water every 7 days. This is debatable. I think it relies on a statistic, but I think it's a broken statistic. However, it's really nothing that dramatic. Now, recently I received a comment from one of my viewers who is saying that their orchid is dying, although they followed the label. Now, what did the label say? Well, first of all, water the orchid with 3 ice cubes. I think we all know what this means. It's a just at ice orchid. Probably, I don't know. But I've never encountered any other company that uses ice with their orchids. I do have a video about this and why I don't think it's a good idea, and why actually orchid societies don't recommend you watering with ice. The bottom line is orchid roots can get really affected by ice because orchids are actually tropical plants. Let's say the majority that we can find available in stores, and particularly Phalaenopsis. Even though they're pretty complex hybrids, they do have some tropical ancestors, and you cannot obtain an Arctic plant out of tropical ancestors. So that's the first wrong piece of advice. I will not insist on the subject because, as I told you, I did talk about this a long time ago, and I sometimes mention it in my videos. However, the next piece of information. After the orchid is done blooming, it goes into dormancy. And mind you, it's a Phalaenopsis orchid. Now, in this dormancy period, you need to place your orchid in the dark. So this is what I get from the message from my viewer. This is what I think the label says. And this is very concerning, because Phalaenopsis orchids never ever have dormancies. They have continuous growth. And of course, there will be some YouTube creators who will say otherwise. Of course, there will be blogs and even some articles who will mention something about dormancy. But that's just personal opinions, okay? Let's just call it like that. If you do some research, you will find more credible articles that suggest they do not have a dormancy. However, to have that on a user's manual, on instructions, is pretty unacceptable in my opinion. In time, you will realize that Phalaenopsis orchids do not go dormant. They will grow leaves and roots as they have flowers or after they're done blooming. And don't confuse the sort of a break an orchid takes to adjust to a new environment, to adjust to new medium, to recuperate from illness, when your orchid seems to do nothing, but it is actually doing something inside a structure. Now, a dormancy in the dark implies that an orchid does not photosynthesize. And for an orchid to not photosynthesize, usually, not all the cases, it needs to lose its leaves. Well, Phalaenopsis orchids never lose leaves, except the bottom ones that fall regularly as new ones are created. A Phalaenopsis orchid will never lose all of its leaves totally, because it's just going dormant and it doesn't need to photosynthesize. If your orchid loses all of its leaves, it's pretty much a sign that there's something terribly wrong with it. And sadly, this is the case of my viewer. Her orchid is losing all of her leaves. Now, the causes for this might be multiple. I cannot really guess. It can be a combination of things. Maybe because it did not have light to photosynthesize, it lost its leaves. Maybe ice was placed on the top of the orchid in the crown or in between the leaves, and this rotted the axis and made the leaves fall. Also, maybe the roots are gone, because watering with ice does not give you control over how much water the pot has, and so on. You don't really drain the pot after you put the ice in, do you? And of course, the medium is sphagnum moss, and sphagnum moss and a lot of water don't go together at all. And all of this drama, I will not say money lost, because it's just an orchid, but the attachment to the orchid, maybe you received it from a dear person, all of this sadness because of a label. And this really makes me sad, and I don't get put off by many things. As somebody said, I'm a thick-skinned person, and I really am. However, these things are not things to mess around with, because if we start questioning labels, maybe orchid labels, we will start to question true labels like insecticide labels or important labels, which we really should follow. But in any case, I did want to address this issue. I don't know if the people who actually just bought a Just Add Ice orchid will actually see this video, but if you do, just keep this in mind. And I'm not saying to listen to me or my videos, I'm saying to do research. And I think the best place to start is the American Orchid Society, which is an authority in this domain, and it's the place where most of us started to learn about orchids as well, and you have the links below. Okay, thank you guys for watching. Hope your orchids are doing okay, even if they are Just Add Ice orchids. There's nothing wrong with them as long as you care for them properly. In the greenhouses where they were bred, there's no such thing as watering with ice. So if you'd like to see more orchid videos from me, simply subscribe to my channel. I post on a daily basis. Also, feel free to leave me comments if you have questions or suggestions for videos or topics and so on in the comment section below. I always read them and I always respond. And also feel free to send me a letter anytime at the address you see on the screen right here and also in the description below. If you click on the left side of your screen, you're gonna be directed to orchidnature.com, where you'll find care sheets, identification sheets, and also you can talk to us in the forum section. And on the right side of your screen, you can click to watch another orchid video. Thank you for joining. I'll see you next time. Bye!